In this module, we are going to discuss the different offers you may receive and how to handle them, or more specifically, how to negotiate them. We are going to start with an overview of your bottom line in case you missed the previous video. Then we can talk about the different offers you might receive, followed by how to handle the different types of opening offers. Lastly, we will go into what to do when you have multiple offers and how to handle counteroffers. Let's start with a quick overview of knowing your bottom line. You need to know the range of offers that you're willing to accept. The top end of your range, of course, is your listing price. The bottom end of your range is the absolute rock bottom price you're willing to accept. Your rock bottom price should be enough to cover all your expenses at closing. The place between your bottom and your top is your range. Once you have an offer inside this range, be very careful with your counteroffers. If you ever watch the show Shark Tank, you know that if you get too greedy, it could cost you the deal. We will get more into the specifics about that in just a few minutes. Next, let's talk about the types of offers you will receive. If you've already been through the marketing section, then this may be a repeat for you. I am going to go through each type of offer you may receive and talk about the pros and cons of each. These are in no particular order. An offer contingent on the sale of a buyer's home. This is generally a bad idea because your buyer wants you to wait until they sell their home before they buy yours. While this is an unfortunate situation that many buyers are in, it's not ideal for you and I recommend you avoid it. The advantage is that you get an offer. The disadvantage is, though, is you have no control over what the buyer is going to do to sell their home. Let's face it, the buyer could just be nuts. Real estate friends of mine have told me about situations where they have paid $80 to have something fixed to ensure the deal did not fall apart. $80. Additionally, a buyer for my mom's house was delayed over 6 weeks because a mortgage wasn't taken off their home back in the 1980s whenever they refinanced it. There are too many unknowns for you to risk taking your home off the market when you have an offer on it. An offer to buy sight unseen. This happened to me whenever I sold my first home. An out-of-town buyer liked all the information I had on Zillow, including the disclosures and the floor layouts, that they wanted to make an offer before coming to see the home. Again, the positive here is that you receive an offer on the home. However, sales contracts are written in a way that makes it very easy for a buyer to back out. So if the buyer comes and looks at your home after they've signed the sales contract, it's easy for them to find something they don't like about the home and legitimately back out of the sales contract. I recommend taking any offer sight unseen. The buyer wants you to finance all or part of the mortgage. A lot of times these are called land contracts or contracts for deed. They can go by many other names as well. I've seen this happen more in smaller towns and rural areas than in larger cities and suburbs. I'm a big fan of the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Rich Dad states that this is a great deal because if the buyer does not pay the monthly payments, you get your home back and you can sell it again. In the end, you will need to decide if you need the cash now. If you need the cash to pay off your mortgage, you will not be able to accept a deal like this. Your mortgage company will not allow you to transfer the deed and keep the mortgage on the home. The buyer may want to pay a big chunk of the home with cash and then have you lend him the rest of the money for the home. The chunk of money that the buyer will pay at closing needs to be enough to cover your current mortgage. The big negative here is that you don't walk away with a lot of cash in your pocket to go put down a down payment on a new home. Most buyers will ask up front if you're willing to do this. However, make sure that you're asking for a pre-qualification letter or a bank statement to weed out these buyers. Buyers wanting to rent. We will probably see interest rates going up shortly, which will drive more people to rent than buy. In many areas, rental homes go very quickly, and you may have renters calling to ask you if you'd be willing to rent your home. This is another situation that if you don't need the money, it could be a viable option for you. However, if you need the money, you probably want to skip this. If you get a lot of calls about renters, you can always update your Zillow listing to indicate that you're not willing to rent this home. A buyer who is willing to pay cash. Although I'm not lucky enough to be in this position yet, many buyers are. These buyers often want to move very quickly. They're in a hurry, especially when they sold their home and need to move out before the closing. In these cases, the buyers will not have to go through a lot of the requirements that a mortgage buyer would have to go through. For example, they would not have to have an appraisal completed. This enables them to move much more quickly. Buyers with an FHA or VA loan. There are other federally subsidized loans out there that can be wrapped into this grouping as well. I just don't know them all. Anytime the government is involved, there are much higher standards that will be required for closing. For example, one of the sellers told me they had to have a leaky faucet fixed before closing because the buyer was getting an FHA loan. These appraisals and inspections for these types of loans are very stringent. These buyers are good buyers, and there's nothing wrong with their credit. However, it just may take a little bit longer for the closing, and you may need to do a little bit more in small repairs. Buyers with a conventional loan. This is what we're all used to, and it's the most common. A buyer takes out a loan and puts anywhere from 5 to 20% down. You go through the traditional closing process that will take about 60 days, and it may require a few small repairs. Unless you need to sell very, very quickly, there's nothing wrong with these types of loans. Something I want to point out here when you're dealing with banks. The bank will order an appraisal on the home, and the appraiser will come by and do a very thorough inspection of the home. Once the appraisal is finished, he will submit a copy of the appraisal to the mortgage company. If the appraisal comes back lower than your negotiated price, then you're going to have to restructure the deal. The buyer will either have to come up with the cash to cover the difference, or you will need to lower the price to get the deal to go through. I will say that this is rare, but it can happen in very hot markets where prices are rising quickly. The last time I saw it happen was in 2015 in Denver, Colorado. Buyers without a real estate agent. These are the best because both you and the buyer will be able to save money. However, you may need to do a little bit more and be a little bit more involved in the transaction to help things move along. This may take a little bit more of your time, but you will have a much larger reward in the end. Offers with contingencies or concessions. When it's a buyer's market, and it almost always is these days, buyers will demand more from sellers. These types of concessions can include paying closing costs, making repairs, providing cash at closing so the buyers can make repairs, or a whole host of other things. Keep in mind what your rock bottom price is and make sure that these concessions do not eat into that. Those are the types of offers that I've come across in my personal experience and in interviewing other sellers. If I hear about other types of offers in the future, I will add them to the transcript below and indicate that it's been updated. If you see that the transcript has been updated, go ahead and check the offer section for updates. Next, let's talk about the different types of opening offers you may receive. Again, I'm going to go through these in no particular order. Before we get into the types of offers, though, let me give you one observation. This is not backed by science, just something I've seen over the years. When a buyer knows the price of your home and then makes an offer, their goal is typically to meet somewhere in the middle. If I have my home listed for $250,000 and I'm offered $230,000, I'm pretty sure that the buyer is aiming for the $240,000 range. You can typically validate this by counter-offering a couple $1,000s off your price. If the buyer matches you with a similar increase in the counteroffer, it's a safe bet that they're trying to meet you in the middle. However, if the buyer counters by increasing his offers less than you decrease your offer, you can probably bet the buyer is trying to come in lower than the midpoint. The same is true for the high side. If you counter to $248,000 and the buyer comes back at $240,000, the buyer will probably accept an offer in the $244,000 to $245,000 range. The point of me sharing this with you is not to give you hard and fast rules to go by. I want you to look at the negotiation from the buyer's point of view. Take into careful consideration everything the buyer says and how they react to your counteroffers. Now that that's out of the way, let's jump into each of the different offers. Lowball offers. You are going to receive offers that are extremely low. This is part of the game and you should not get offended. There's three types of people that are going to make lowball offers. The first type is the hotshot who's trying to get the best deal possible. The best way to negotiate with these individuals is to stick to your guns and only inch down on your counteroffers. At first, they will probably inch up to match your counters. Most likely, though, they're truly interested in your home but are trying to drive a hard bargain. Once you get to your bottom line, stick to your guns. You can tell them that that's your final offer and refuse to go down anymore. The second group you may receive a lowball offer from is investors. These individuals have set parameters on what they're willing to pay for your home so they can make a profit. If you've identified the individual as an investor, you can drop down to the lower end of your range quickly and tell the investor that that's your bottom line. The investor will quickly accept or reject the offer. The third group is a buyer who can't quite afford your home. Oftentimes, you'll find out that this is the maximum amount that the buyer can afford. Don't fault the buyer for trying to get a great home at a good price. In this case, it's okay to reject the offer outright. If the buyer comes back with a higher offer, you know that they were not telling the truth. Negotiate with them in a similar fashion to the hot shots above. Inch down and make them come up. An offer that's slightly lower than your range. Let's say your list price is $260,000 and your bottom line is $250,000. You get an offer for $240,000. You are in a good position. This is probably going to be a more common type of offer that you'll see. In this case, I would recommend countering with about 1% less than your asking price. I would counter with about $258,000. From that point forward, consider matching the buyer's counteroffer. For example, if your buyer comes up $3,000, consider going down $3,000. Once you get the buyer into your range, go ahead and accept the offer. An offer that's in your range. If you're lucky, the first offer you get will be lower than your list price, but still in your range. Even though it's in your range, I recommend making a counteroffer at this point. The buyer expects this. Again, I would counteroffer to see how the buyer reacts. Consider lowering your price about 1% or to meet the buyer about halfway, whichever is less. At this point, you'll need to tread lightly. If the buyer accepts, great. But if the buyer counteroffers, I'd recommend taking that offer. This is a win for you because you're still in your range and you got a little bit more money. An offer for list price. In some cases, especially if you've done a good job pricing your home for sale, you will get an offer for your listing price. I'm a firm believer that you should not be greedy. You should accept the offer. In this case, the buyer thinks that the price is fair and does not want to negotiate. Any counteroffer will put you in a bad light, and there's a good chance that the buyer will walk away. Imagine how you would feel if you went into a car dealership and offered to pay sticker price for a new car. The salesman turns around and asks you to pay for a higher price. You would walk off the lot immediately. An offer above list price. If you live in a hot market, you may get lucky enough to get an offer over your list price. This type of offer is typically going to come from someone who needs to move quickly and has been in at least one bidding war on a previous occasion. I recommend treating this just like an offer for list price. Accept the offer right away. Keep in mind that if you've done your homework on pricing your home for sale, the buyer may have trouble getting the mortgage company to appraise the home for that high of an amount. What is your bottom line? In some cases, you may not get an offer at all. Instead, you may be asked the question, what's your bottom line? This type of offer is going to come from someone who doesn't like to negotiate, but wants to feel like they got a good deal. In this case, I recommend splitting your range in half. If you have your house listed for $260,000 and your bottom line is $250,000, tell the buyer your bottom line is $255,000. Or, if you're really hoping that you would get $257,000, go ahead and give that number as your price. If you do have an appraisal on the home, I would recommend giving the appraisal amount. At this point, you don't know what the buyers are going to do, so you don't want to give it all away. If the buyer wants to start negotiating at this point, make sure you go down very, very slowly and reiterate that you've already given him your bottom line. At that point, I would recommend negotiating that the buyer start paying some of the closing costs if you have to decrease your price even further. Multiple offers. There are going to be times when you may have multiple offers. These offers come in one of two flavors. Either you get the offers within the same day, or you have one offer and you're anticipating other offers very shortly. Let's start with multiple offers on the table at the same time. In this case, you have an offer and you receive another offer before you're able to respond to the first offer. In these scenarios, you should tell the buyer with a lower offer that you have another offer that is higher than their offer and invite them to submit a higher offer. Give them a deadline that you're comfortable with, but no more than 24 hours. Do not tell either buyer what the other offer is. You should tell the buyer with the highest offer that you have other offers on the table and that you're considering his offer. You will give him an answer within 24 hours. This approach will clearly let the lower offer know that they need to come up and will hint at the higher offer that there's a bidding war that may ensue. The higher offer buyer needs to consider raising his offer too. If one of your other buyers beats the highest offer, then follow the same pattern. Tell your highest offer that you have multiple offers on the table and you will give him an answer in 24 hours. Tell the buyers with lower offers that you have a higher offer and you're considering, and invite them to resubmit an offer within the time frame of no more than 24 hours. Remember, this is going to be a stressful time for the buyers, so be patient but decide quickly. If a buyer needs a home quickly and they get into a bidding war, the buyer is likely to be putting in offers on multiple homes at the same time. Once the dust settles and you're no longer getting higher offers, then accept the highest offer quickly. One caveat here. In some cases, you may have a cash buyer who can close quickly. In this case, if the cash buyer is within a few $1,000s, I recommend going with the cash buyer's offer. That buyer will not have to jump through hoops with the mortgage company and is less likely to require a home inspection. Removing these obstacles decreases your chance of closing on your home and getting your money. The other scenario you may face is having an offer from one buyer, but you have other interested buyers out there. This is where you want to make sure that you have their contact information handy. As soon as you get the offer, call the other buyers and let them know that you have an offer on the home. Give them until the end of the day or the next day at noon to submit an offer. The time frame should be no more than 24 hours. Make sure to tell the buyer who made the offer that you're considering their offer, but you have other interested buyers that are talking to you as well. Reassure the buyer that you will give him an answer in 24 hours. I know that's a lot of scenarios and it may seem scary. Don't forget to use the negotiation simulators to practice. Also remember that you can get quick feedback from the Facebook group. Let's take a minute to talk about counteroffers. I've already told you most of this, but I want to reiterate with a couple key points. Number 1, make sure that you always counteroffer. Unless a buyer offers list price or better, if you receive an offer that's in your range, it's risky to counteroffer. However, buyers expect to negotiate for a home, and when they negotiate, they feel like they've won. In the end, you'll end up with a much happier buyer. This is the same principle that makes websites like eBay so popular. Bidders pay higher prices on eBay for items that they can get on Amazon for cheaper, and they keep coming back. Number 2, make sure you respond quickly. Making an offer on a house is very emotional. In today's world, people want instant feedback and instant gratification. If you take too long to respond for an offer, the buyer is likely to renege on that offer. Remember, the offer is not binding until both of you sign the sales contract and the buyer cements it with their deposit. Never counter with just a number. We see scenes in TV shows and in movies all the time where a buyer and seller are negotiating by writing numbers on a piece of paper and sliding it back and forth across a table. This is entertaining, but it's bad negotiating form. You want to know as much as you can about your buyer so you can use that knowledge to your advantage. For example, if you know the buyer needs to move quickly, you can counter with a higher price and a faster move-in date. Or, if the buyer isn't ready to move yet, you could counter with a higher price and an offer to rent back your home for 1 or more months. If you have first-time buyers, you could counter with a higher price and a home warranty to remove their risk. In all these cases, you would get a higher price than you would have if you would have just given them a number. If you don't have anything like that to counter back with, make sure you're justifying the price. For example, you could point out a home nearby that sold for a similar or a higher amount. If the buyer rejects your counter, you can still accept their last offer. Let's face it, we all make mistakes. If you get a bit greedy and you counter your buyer and they flat out reject it, you can go back and ask to accept the last offer from the buyer. Will you lose face? Sure, but who cares? This is a transaction and money speaks louder than pride. Besides, the buyer will really think that they got a great deal. It's okay to go back and forth with these counteroffers verbally. They do not have to be in writing. You do want to make sure that you get the final offer in writing once you come to a deal, though. One last question we'll cover here today is, how do you know you're getting a good deal? First off, it's a tough question to answer this in general. My overall advice is that if you feel that you've got a good deal, then you got a good deal. In the end, your home is worth exactly the amount that you and the buyer agree upon. If you do a great job pricing your home for sale, then your negotiated amount will come in close to your asking price. However, if you price your home way too high, it can come in at a much lower negotiated amount. But how do you compare to other sellers? Let's run through some of the statistics from the National Association of Realtors. 2 out of 5 sellers who do not use an agent sell their home for asking price or more. Only 1 out of 3 sellers using an agent sell their home for asking price or more. Roughly 2 out of 5 sellers, regardless if they're using an agent or not, sell their home for at least 95% of their asking price. The remaining 1 in 4 buyers sell their home for less than 95% of asking price. In short, if you sell your home for asking price or more, you're in the top 40%. If you sell your home for 95 to 99% of asking price, you're in the middle 40%. And if you sell your home for less than 95% of your asking price, you are in the bottom 20%. That concludes the training on offers and how to handle them. Make sure that you use the Facebook group if you have any questions during this process. When something is urgent, type my name, Jake Posey, in your post, and it will send me a notification on Facebook. Thank you.